Hi, good morning everyone. My name is Rahul, as was introduced to you, and today I'm going to talk to you about AI and its implications on audit. I understand that most of you have accountants background, and just to maybe get started, I will just tell you what I want to cover today. What we will cover today is the whole thing on AI and generative AI, on what is AI, what is generative AI. Both of the terms are typically used very interchangeably. Then we'll talk about, see, we are accountants and we need to audit AIs in times to come or use AI for audits. So we need to understand what are the building blocks of AI. And from the building blocks of AI, we need to understand what are the risk surface areas, because there is risk in each building block, and I'll tell you how that is there. And then I'll give you some examples on auditing AI by IA. So when we say, let's say as an accountant or as an auditor, you are faced with a system which is using AI. How do you go about doing its audit? Largely in the internal audit context, and that's why IA. And then I'll talk briefly about the regulations of which are there in AI, what's happening, and then way forward on what you should be doing. So let me maybe start with a Mentimeter question. We will use Menti, so maybe you can use your phones. So if you can go to menti.com and enter the code, which is this code, right? There will be a question that you need to answer. I don't know whether the question will be flashed here. Okay. Okay. Once you log in, then okay. This is just to get an understanding of from an audience perspective. Where are you from an AI perspective? Okay, so that I get a sense on the kind of audience I'm addressing here today. So hopefully this should work. Menti.com should not be a problem. Need a working data connection. Okay. Let's see if this tech works or not. Can we go to the next slide so that people can get the question? Yeah, okay, so the question is this, how do you rate your current understanding of AI? Okay, okay, so we have mostly beginners or intermediate, okay. I see a very honest audience, so that's very good. Yeah, because I'm tracking the number of experts here. I can't say that I'm an expert, so if I can learn something from somebody, that would be very nice. Okay. Okay, so perfect. Okay, so that gives me a very good view of, so largely intermediate and beginner, and I'm not surprised. That's what is the current state of AI. So if we can move back to the next slide of the presentation, please. Yeah. So let me get on to AI, right? Now, AI is not a new field. It started in 1950s. It's so old, right? But it's gone to the headline news. It's there in front of our eyes. So it's having its what I call as a browser moment. It's in front of every one of us, right? When you go to the computer, you use the browser. So when you go to the computer, you will likely be using any AI chatbot. I'm sure many of you would have used. There are enough and more number of AI-driven applications which are there for us to use. So what's the difference between AI and generative AI? And I'll get to that. So AI, if you see, is like a discipline, right? So like physics is a discipline, like finance is a discipline. So think of AI as that discipline, as the umbrella, right? Within AI, you have several techniques like natural language processing is a separate subfield within it. Machine learning is a separate field within it, right? And in machine learning, what you essentially do is you make the machine learn from data, right, to predict outputs. Okay, so that is, just keep this thing in your mind. So there is a machine. I'm using a very fairly generic term because I'm not sure how many of you are from the tech domain. So just think of it as a machine which looks at data, understands the patterns within the data, and uses that pattern to predict an output, right? So that is machine learning. And within machine learning, you have what is called as deep learning. And deep learning is essentially a very, very important aspect for you to understand, because from the deep learning only things like generative AI come out. Okay, so generative AI is within deep learning. Okay, and how generative AI works is the same principle of machine learning, which I told you is kind of there. It's just that here the traditional AI was largely on structured data, but here the inputs that generative AI is kind of getting in is any kind of unstructured data, whether it is images, whether it is video, whether it is unstructured text, etc. And the machine then kind of learns and is able to not only identify patterns, but using the patterns, it is able to generate something. Okay, so the key word in generative AI is the word generate. So if you are talking to your client, if you're talking to your friends, colleagues, academia, the thing to distinguish is generative AI is all about generation. It is something net new, which was not there before. Because the machine has learned a pattern, understood what it is. For example, the machine has learned the image or how a cat looks like, and is able to generate a picture of cat which was not there present earlier. So it's a net new generation, right? So just keep that in mind, because that's an important thing to have in your mind when you do this. Okay. So now let me give you some sort of difference between what traditional AI has been and what generative AI is. Using some sort of examples. So when we talk about traditional AI, think prediction, think classification, right? So let me give you a classification example, and since I'm from India, let me give an example of how the government of India is using classification as a very, very important use case. This has been in the use for the last, I think, 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. So India has a scheme of midday meals in schools. So they will provide kids meals. The school has to provide, but that a meal has to adhere to the quality standard prescribed by the government. So the principal of the school has a duty of taking an image of a meal served that day, right? Uploading to a government portal, and the AI decides whether the quality was met or not. So it classifies good quality, bad quality. So that's a traditional AI. So that's why it's been used for the last 5 years, as an example. Again, predictive AI. I think predictive AI is also fairly important, easy use case that we've been using. So let's say you use any OTT platform to watch a movie, you listen to Spotify for music, right? Or so it kind of uses your data to predict what you would like to hear. So that is predictive AI, right? So Spotify will predict, say, okay, this song you may want to listen, or Amazon may say that, okay, this is a product that you may want to buy. So that's predictive AI. Now, generative AI, as I was saying, is essentially everything. If you look at, on my left side, everything is about creation, right? So let's say when you create a particular content, right? So if you have to create, let's say you say, I want to create a presentation on generative AI, it will create something from what it has done, right? So that is net new. If you are talking about another aspect on, let's say, code generation. So let's say Microsoft is coming out with GitHub Copilot. I don't know anyone of you here use GitHub Copilot? Okay, no. So it's okay. I see few hands, very few hands. So GitHub Copilot is basically a feature that Microsoft has given for you to generate software code. Okay, so you can actually generate a software code from scratch. Now again, search, and we have all used search. I don't know how many of you, just to kind of maybe raise of hands, how many of you used let's say Gemini AI from Google? How many? Okay, I see few. So it can, so now when you go to Google search, there is also an option where you can see that, okay, what is the AI generated content, and then followed by the typical page links which the Google algorithm gives. So it gives an AI generated summary content. So again, generation, that content was not there, it was generated specifically for the query that you gave to Google. Okay, so that's some examples. Now if I move to the next slide, yes. Okay, some more examples here, largely from a finance perspective. Okay, so if you have to create dashboards, now dashboard is another example. So typically a financial controller would say that, or in a company would say that, okay, towards the month end, or as a regular financial discipline on, give me top 10 debtors, right? Because I need to call up those customers for payments. Imagine you talking to your ERP systems saying that, okay, give me top 10. Okay, so or talking to your dashboarding system or your data warehousing system. So that's what is the next level in which they are doing. We already have a lot of dashboard driven platforms like Tableau, ClickView, all SAP kind of platforms anyways kind of give you a lot of dashboards. But imagine the interface is changed to voice instead of somebody typing. So that's already happening. And I will have a slide on SAP Joule just to kind of tell you what SAP is also coming out with, because every IT company or every software company today is now going and integrating AI in its offerings. Without AI, they believe that they will be perceived as somebody who's behind the learning curve. Then reimbursements, again, maybe I'll give you an example in the context of SAP Joule on what it can and it cannot do. And then of course research reports. So as auditors, as accountants, we have to generate a lot of reports, right? Imagine, and we have to do research in order to get an understanding. Imagine your first port of call is to an AI chatbot, and you say that, okay, on this particular topic, tell me what has, let's say, maybe the regulator come out with. Now, for example, I do audits of clients which are, which are under the PCAOB, which is the US or US regulator. And one of the things PCAOB does is PCAOB audits the big four accounting firms fairly regularly and publishes a lot of reports on its website. Now, if you are an accounting firm and you want to learn from what the regulator has given as areas of improvement, you can tell an AI chatbot, okay, look at the PCAOB reports for last 1 year for, let's say, KPMG, UI, etc., and tell me what have been the common themes. So that's a huge win for you, right? Because you will very quickly learn, okay, these are the areas that I need to focus, rather than yourself, parsing down all the reports one by one. So just some of the examples. Okay, so I'm talking about SAP Joule, and so SAP Joule is again, again a quick check, raise of hands. Most of you would have seen SAP here. Is it the ERP system in use in Maldives? Yeah, I see a lot of hands. Okay, so SAP has now come out with the business technology platform called the BTP, and it is being offered on SAP Cloud. And through BTP, a lot of AI features are also coming out, whether it is recruitment, sales, purchasing, code generation, travel and expense. So for example, when you upload, let's say, a voucher, you've taken a business travel, and you upload a voucher saying that, okay, this is the meal that I had. Joule will be intelligent enough to say that, but the voucher also includes an alcoholic drink item which is prohibited by the company policy. You cannot claim it, right? So things like those will automatically start happening, right? You don't need to specifically create a rule, somebody needs to check, okay? Now, again, let me take an example of sales management, or let's say purchasing. Your vendors, where you kind of purchase your goods from, will typically send you a bill. Now, if somebody has to raise a bill, and look at a bill, which will be a PDF document, 10 bills will be 10 different formats of 10 different suppliers. The Joule will be able to understand it and identify, okay, this is what it means, this is the item, etc. Imagine the kind of efficiencies that you will get into, right? So, just to kind of tell you that these are the areas in which generative AI is being used, because what Joule is doing, it is reading, the text which is there on the invoice and generating what is the right input in the SAP system and making that input, right? So that's generative AI for you. Okay. Okay. So now let's get on to the risk surface areas, on generative AI. This is important because I'm just doing a check of time. Yeah, good. Okay. So let me go with a difference between software development lifecycle and machine learning. Okay. So we all use software, right? Microsoft Office, very commonly used software. Gmail, very commonly used software. So when that software is to be developed by somebody, how is that software developed? A software developer typically understands the business requirements, writes some software code, somebody tests it, and then that software is brought to life, right? So that is how it is done. In AI, it is typically the other way. So data plays a very, very limited role in software development. So let me tell you in machine learning. So this is the typical software development life cycle. Okay, you tell the rules to the developer. The developer uses that rules, generates a code, uses some data to test that code, and you have a program in between which will give you answers, right? So whenever that some new data comes in, the program runs and gives you answers. In machine learning, as I told earlier, it's the other way around, right? So you give it data, you give it answers, which is the labels of those data, in labeled data, and the machine kind of learns the rules. Okay, that this is how I need to work. So that is the rule which or the pattern that the machine has understood. So that's why what machine learning or AI is, it's a combination of 3-4 fields. It is a combination of course, software. It is a combination of mathematics. It is a combination of statistics. It is a combination of probability within mathematics, right? And that's why, because it is probabilistic, one of the pitfalls of this whole thing is that it will never be 100% at the moment. Maybe technology improves over a period of time to become 100%. It will always generate something with some degree of accuracy. And that is perhaps one of the main reasons why enterprises are kind of asking questions. There are many more questions to say, should I use this in production or not? Although people are still, going ahead with it. And with that, it's a complicated kind of diagram, but don't get overwhelmed by it. So if somebody asks you, okay, what is AI, right? So you can tell that, okay, AI is comprised of, let's say 4 layers, okay? There is this data layer. Remember my previous diagram, right? There has to be data, because that's when the machine will learn, right? So there is the data layer, right? And then the machine or this thing is, what the machine learned, the output of that learning is into a model. So that's the model which gets developed when the data, after learning from the data. So that's the learned model. Then there has to be server compute infrastructure to host all of this, right? And then there have to be many process layers, to kind of make this whole magic work. So that's where the application layer, the orchestration layer, etc. kind of come together, the governance layer come together. So it starts, with typically like a business tool. You will start with a business tool. You will identify which data has to be ingested for this particular requirement. You will identify which features on the data are important. So for example, if you have to prepare a spam generator, right? Something which can classify an email as a spam or not as a spam, right? Again, traditional AI. You will know that, okay, grammar is an important thing because we've all received those mails, or the sender is an important thing because is the sender in my address book, because typically somebody who's in your address book will not send a spam. It is unknown people who will send you spam. Okay, so you will use those, and then you will select a model, you will train the model, you will test the model, you will evaluate whether it has passed the level of accuracy I wanted, and then you will implement that model, right? So that is how the whole life cycle kind of works. And I will now talk to you about the risks which are there at each of these layers. So let's talk about the data layer. Okay. So the data layer, since the machine is learning from data. So if again the old adage of garbage in, garbage out prevails. If you have poor data to train the machine will be trained poorly, right? And that's when let's say there are use cases. We hear a lot of examples where a chatbot gave very funny answers, etc. And that is because either it was not trained on that data, or it was trained on limited data. That scenario wasn't there. So that is what is typically called as reasons for hallucination. Okay, this is a very common term that you would hear, that the AI models are hallucinating. Okay, then the other bit is privacy breach. Now there are a lot of privacy regulations. Where I come from, India has a privacy law. And I'm sure if you have exposure to European Union, there is GDPR. I'm not privy to what are the privacy laws at Maldives, but if there are, if imagine you are training your machine on a model, on a data in which a lot of private data is being used, right? And so that's violation of law. That cannot be done because it has to be masked and then it has to be trained, or there are other technologies. It has to be anonymized and then machine has to train. Because there could be, there are techniques in which you can price that data out from the machine learning algorithm if you ask some intelligent prompts and if the controls haven't been implemented. So that's the privacy breach. Then bias. Bias is another area, a very, very new area, right? For AI models, and specifically, self-driving cars. Okay, so let me take that example to explain to you on bias, right? So bias or let me take a different example, more easier to understand. Bias, let's take gender bias as an example, right? Now, in many credit card applications, typically what we see in India, it's not a gender bias, but a location bias. People originating from a particular area, a particular set of pin code or zip code will typically not be given credit. Why? Because over a period of time, the bank who's providing the credit has understood that if we give credit to this people, loan borrowers from this area, we don't get regular payments. So that intelligence has come into their heads, right? It's a subtle intelligence. But when the machine learns from the data, it understands that okay, pin code ending with 05, loans applications typically get rejected. So don't give loans here, right? Now, is that bias or is that not bias? A business will say it is not bias because I am protecting myself. Ultimately, I have to reduce my risk. But from an ML perspective, somebody may say it's biased because you're taking a pin code out. Okay, so that's just one example. Another thing is that okay, marginalized communities. I don't let's say offer loans to them, etc. So enough number of examples on that one. So what is the right thing to do? And this is where, and just keep this in your mind, when you are part of any AI journey, you have to understand who is on the table to decide how the AI should be built. So, how do we deal with such kind of scenarios, right? So that is from a bias perspective. Intellectual property protection, again, a very, very important aspect. How these chatbots like, ChatGPT, etc. have learned is largely scraping information of the internet. There are n number of lawsuits which are going in the US against OpenAI, the author of ChatGPT, saying that you learned from my data without asking for my permission. Okay, so how can you now generate? So let's say one very important example which is going on is with Getty Images. Getty Images is a big publisher of images globally, right? They have sued OpenAI. A lot of companies have sued OpenAI saying that you did not take my permission and now you are generating revenue, you are giving your service on a subscription using my intellectual property, but I was never compensated for it, right? So that's another very, very important aspect. Another related aspect is that who owns the data or which is generated by this chatbot? Is it owned by OpenAI, which is the author? Is it owned by you because you are the user? Is it owned by the enterprise? Let's say if the enterprise has taken the license and given it to you, there are no clear answers. Okay, so it's early days, we'll figure out on how do we get that. But if you read the fine print of some of these things, they also are not giving you any answer. Read the fine print if somebody who's interested on what does Microsoft say on OpenAI service, on who owns the output. In the simple term, Microsoft very clearly says we don't own it and we can't tell you that you also own it. Because the chatbot can give the same answer to company A, same answer to company B, right? So who will own it? So that's Microsoft, it's like a unknown territory today. So fairly interesting and we'll see how this develops. Okay, so enough on data layer. Now maybe I'll move to the model layer, right? So at the model layer, because the model is the main brains behind this, right? There are a lot of risks which are there. So let's say people typically use models. So these models are either closed models or open source models. Now open source models come to you free of cost. Now the large open source models like the Llamas of the world, the Mixtrals or the Mistrals of the world are typically put by some, let's say Llama is authored by Meta, so you can still say okay, Meta would have put some controls. But then there are a lot of open source models which are available on libraries like Hugging Face, and we don't know, what are the kind of controls that were used to build that model up from scratch. It's quite likely that there could be a lot of risk, a lot of backdoors, a lot of cyber issues in using that particular model. And we will only get to know once we have tested that model well. So please be, when you talk to your clients and they say, okay, I'm using this open source model, some alarm bells should go off and say, okay, where did you source this from? What kind of testing did you do? How do you know that these risks are addressed? So, and because if it is taken from sources which are not fairly reputed and not tested well, the model may be a reason to induce a breach in your organization. It may actually introduce maybe some ransomware which you don't otherwise want. So it could give big headaches to your technology teams, in companies. And then what also happens is that the model drifts over a period of time. All these models stop their learning at a point in time. So for example, If you use the free version or Chat GPT today, it was trained on data which was I think 2 years old. So if you ask it something for today's, in today's context, for example, if you say, okay, this session in Maldives, when is it being scheduled? What's the second session? What's the schedule like? It will say, sorry, I don't know because I was trained before that. So your model can become out of sync because the data is moved on, but the model is still living the 20-21 days when it was last trained on. So that's again risk. So these are some of the risks from a model perspective. If I move at a compute layer now, compute layer risks are traditional risks, right? So these are related to things relating to, let's say, denial of service. If the infrastructure gets overwhelmed by a lot of queries, then the infrastructure stops responding. Then maybe I'll talk about the E goals on ESG. Now all these models, when they are trained, they require huge amount of computing power. So if you look at, let's say, the financial reports of companies like Alphabet, which owns Google, or Microsoft, which is invested in OpenAI, their ESG goals are already falling behind primarily due to AI, because the kind of investments they have done in AI, the kind of electricity consumption that has gone up to keep those models up and running, it has really impacted them adversely, right? So on one side we say ESG, on the other side we are doing AI. So AI and ESG will have to there'll have to be a good balance of between the two of them, right? Then I move on to the process layer, and this is where maybe I'll pick one or two some key ones here. So let me talk about explainability. Now explainability is a fairly new thing, right? When we've traditionally used software, right? We've always said, okay, whatever the software says, we just take it for granted that it is right. But mark my words, what I said, that it is probabilistic in nature, right? So filled with some degree of accuracy, it will predict. So how do you know that this is predicting, and how do you know how it is predicting? It's just like a black box. You ask a question, you get an answer. So that's why when you go and audit some of these systems as accountants, as professionals, you have to understand that, okay, why is the output what it is? Explain to me, right? And I'll maybe later in my talk, I'll explain with an example, a very simple example, so that you kind of get it. There are separate techniques. So the point I'm trying to make is, please understand or learn those techniques. Because as accountants, see, AI is going to be here. It's too revolutionary a technology to kind of be set aside. Let's accept that fact, and we will all have to cross that bridge as accountants, as professionals, as internal auditors, to say that, okay, we really need to learn this so that we can do a good audit of it. Okay. Then maybe let me talk about excessive agency. So if you've given excessive agency to your AI software, you say that, okay, whatever the AI software decides, that I will take that as truth and I will move on to the next. There could be a lot of issues. Assuming an AI software gave you wrong output, and some business took a decision on that wrong output, right? Or the AI software itself was given the authority to say that, okay, based on the output that is generated, trigger this particular thing. That is excessive agency. Don't give it excessive control, right? Keep it in check. Keep a human in the loop. Okay, so let's maybe go back to another Mentimeter, because I've kind of talked about risk, and before we move on to the next one, so what do you see as the biggest challenge in auditing AI systems? Okay.
Number of people who have participated, so there is only one. I'm waiting for more answers. If you need the code, we can tell you the code again. So you have to go to menti.com and you will have to enter a code which is 4603948. So there are 2 people now. That's increasing. Good.
Knowledge.
Magic. These are the challenges.
I don't know, what does magic mean? Somebody wrote magic.
So in the case of generative AI, right, you enter one word and it gives the output.
Knowledge is all very knowledge, privacy, data. Okay, so a friendly advice, please learn, go through some very basic courses of AI, right? There's enough and more available. Maybe with one disclaimer, see, I don't have any association with Google, but Google has got some very good courses, very, very basic courses, and they explain very simply on what AI is. There's an edX course on AI for everyone, I think. So maybe just read through it. You guys and your kids can also learn. It's very, very simple. Very simple. Okay, so I think maybe we could maybe move forward to the next question. Okay, the next one is.
Just going to the next question. Can we move to Mentimeter number 3?
Number 3.
The next slide.
Okay.
Now, people have started answering.
Okay.
So, are you currently utilizing AI to perform audits?
Yes. Okay. This is a good cohort to understand. Well, it's reducing because I said yes, is it?
So that's why we covered the risks part first.
Yeah.
To audit, you need to know the risks, and then you need to see what kind of controls are implemented. So that's why the risk was covered, and now we tend to understand how it is being used. And we'll go to some slides which are on audits, on auditing AI. That's the crux of the session as well.
Okay.
Still,
Okay.
I see a very low number here. 27 people have participated.
Yeah, this room has easily more than 50 people. Way more than that. 100 people, right? Only 20 people. People have given up on AI, I guess. This is too complicated. It's increasing, okay? Yeah, you have to nudge. Okay, maybe we will make it wait till it gets to 50 at least, and then we go to the next one.
Okay. At least 64% who say no.
Yeah.
16% are unsure.
Okay. Okay, so I'll share some examples where KPMG has started using, very, very limited areas, but some examples where we have started. Okay, so if we can move to the slide deck, please. So I think I get a sense on what it is. Let me move next. Yeah. Okay. So now we will talk about how do you, as accountants, as internal, because when you're accountant, you're either a part of start audit team, internal audit team, doing some other aspects, right? So the context is largely where you have to audit an AI system. Okay, so what do you do, or what are the kind of audits that we are seeing, right? And so we are seeing 3 kinds of areas which are being looked at. Okay, so one very big area is the whole thing on governance. Okay, governance is essentially about policies, procedures, the organization's point of view on AI, what are how the organization is going to use, not use, etc., etc. So that is one area. That's where things like risk assessments, model governance, life cycle controls come in, and we'll talk about it in a bit. The other bit is platform-driven audits. So, and this is largely we are seeing that a lot of cyber tools are coming out to say that okay, how can we audit the whole AI pipeline? So it's a very cyber-oriented work. That's the other bit. And the last one is command line audit. So just a show of hands, how many of you have actually done coding, written a computer program ever in your life? Ever? When you were in kids also, when you were in school also? Anybody? How many of you? Just please raise your hands proudly so that I see. Okay? I would say maybe 20-25% of the audience, right? Okay? So very less number of people have actually written a program. So I would say that perhaps it will be important that you start getting exposure in this area, because this will be the future for sure, right? You will end up auditing a system which will have some AI built into it, and then you will otherwise feel some bit of problem. Okay, so now let me get on to the governance audit. Okay, so on governance audit, you need to have a framework against which you can do any governance audit. So what KPMG has come out with, this is KPMG's proprietary trusted AI framework, okay? And you see about 10 pillars of this framework, right from things like fairness, transparency, explainability, to things like privacy, reliability, security, there are 10 of them. And we kind of made, when we made this framework, we also consulted with a lot of regulators. We looked at what the regulations are coming out with, right? So we looked at things like the EU AI Act, the NIST risk management framework, then frameworks in Japan, frameworks in China, etc., etc. So what we understood is that these 10 pillars are essentially there in almost all frameworks. Somebody may be calling them by separate names, but these are 10 exclusive areas that you need or organizations need to have when they go for AI governance. So when you're talking to your clients or talking to your organizations and saying, okay, we need to do something on AI governance, you should say that, have you covered all of this? This is a good comprehensive check that you can do at least at the first discussion. And then what does a framework look like? What should be there in the framework, right? So this is what should be there in the AI framework. Again, KPMG proprietary thing, which said that, okay, this is what a good AI framework should look like. It should have, again, for an enterprise, the organizational strategy, because you cannot have an AI framework which is not in sync with the organization strategy. You should have, principles. You should have risk assessments. You should have training. You should have metrics. Very important to say that, okay, how do you monitor what the AI is generating? Because how do you know that the AI can be relied upon still, right? So these are the kind of again, I'm intentionally leaving it at a high level because it will be enough, otherwise it will be too overcomplicated. Okay, so these are the good component or the components of a good AI framework. Okay, having said that, let me get to a platform which KPMG has built. So KPMG built a platform called Cranium. This is something which now KPMG has spun this off as a separate company. Ex-KPMG partners kind of run it, but they work very closely with us. This is essentially, this actually gets down, and since I understood that the audience is not very technology savvy, I will maybe give it at a high level. This essentially goes at an AI pipeline level, at whether it is on the cloud or whether it is on-premise, connects with the AI systems, understands what could be risks in those AI systems, and gives a dashboard that where the risks will lie. Is the risk at a data layer? Is the risk at a model layer? Is the risk somewhere else? So that is what this platform does. It is integrated with various cloud technologies. You can integrate with Azure, Google Cloud, AWS, just to name a few. And these are the kind of dashboards that will give you saying that, okay, where is the problem? You see all greens, some red, some orange. So the red, amber, green dashboard will give. And this is how it kind of shows. Like for some model, it is shown that, okay, the problem is at training data, the problem is at a model inference layer, etc., etc. Okay, I'm just kind of showing at a high level. Now I move on to explainability. Now let me give you an example. Again, this is command line. So the coding has been done in Python as a language. So let's say an organization created a credit model, right? I think that's the example, right? Yeah, credit risk prediction model, where the inputs were age of the customer, income of the customer, loan amount requested by the customer, and the credit score of the customer. And the model had to give an answer of yes or no, or one, whether there is credit risk, or zero, no credit risk, right? So that is a model which I'm sure many banks, many financial institutions actually use. So if you as an auditor are faced with this, how will you check how the model is predicting? And that's where we use a technique called line. Okay, it is a technique which is available, which you can use. And so just to give you a background, this is how the client will tell you. The client will say that we imported the necessary libraries, uploaded the required data set, and split the data set in training and testing, and The model was trained on the training data set, remember what I told you earlier, and then the model started giving output, and that's when it was deployed in production. Okay, so the client will give you this background. Okay, that this is what you now know. Now, what do you need to do as an auditor to say that, okay, because the key thing that you are looking at it in this particular context is explainability. Because it's a black box. It takes in data, gives 0 or 1. Now you need to understand why did it say 0 or why did it say 1, right? It's a logical question, right? Because you will ask that question. So what you will do again is you will begin with some some libraries that you will upload in Python. So libraries are just maybe enablers. Let me say that enablers, it helps you get to the answer that you want to get. So you are actually using the line aspect here, and you start with a particular data set, right? So the data set I have taken in this example is this one, right? 47 is this, where 47 is age, income, loan amount, and credit score, right? So what line does is that basis this particular data set, it creates perturbations. What perturbations are? Variations of this. So it will create multiple line items saying that, okay, let me create age as 48, but let me reduce income, let me improve credit score. So it will create a big data set, which is, that is its functionality. And then what it will do, it will pick up a very simple model, let's say a regression model. And it will say that, okay, let me push this data set in a simple model and see, what is the output that is coming out, right? So when it kind of did that, okay, sorry, not this one. Okay, so when it did that, so you will get a result from live, and you already have a result from the system that you're auditing, right? This data set, when you put it in the system will also say 0 or 1, right? That is what the system has been designed. Now you put it in Lime has generated data, got the output of the model, and then you say, okay, what, Mr. Lime, what are you telling? Okay, so this is what is there. On the left side, okay, the extreme, sorry, your right side, no, your left side. You have the, what the model is saying, okay? The model is saying no risk, okay? Then what Lime is saying is what is there on figure 2. So Lime is saying that there is risk because the credit score is less than 600 as per the linear regression model which Lime picked in this case. But because of age, because of income, because of loan amount, that risk is kind of addressed. And hence, as per the model, the Lime's model, there is a 75% weightage which says that there is no risk, but a 25% which is hence there is risk. You have still not understood what this model does, but you created a separate model to help understand why is the model saying what it is saying. Okay, so you're creating something in parallel to explain the functionality of something which you have to audit. Are you with me? Okay, I see some noise.
Sometimes we use a procedure called deperformance, right? So what we do is we create a parallel model, see what kind of output we get from that model, basis the same input parameters that you enter in. Right? So that's what we're doing here, and trying to test for explainability, because that is one of the important things. We don't know how the model will behave, what output will it give, right? So to understand that, the line is helpful, and it can be used for various use cases in terms of whatever has been developed and whatever is the automation that has been done by using AI. So this is one of the important examples that we wanted to cover so that we can tell you how this is working in parallel and performing again the same type of logic which has been coded in some other system which we use day in and day out to decide whom to give credit and whom not to give.
Yeah. So see, and just to kind of make you understand or drive home the point on the implication of this. See, this is one very simple explainability technique for structured data, traditional AI. As you kind of increase, the gain or the level, right? Let's say we say, okay, how do we do generative AI? Or let's say, how do we do, let's say, reliability, right? This was explainability. How do you do security? How do you do privacy? There will be different procedures that we will have to perform. Okay, so there is clearly a lot to be learned in this area. It's a new evolving field, and that's why I said that you have to start making some of those investments and things within it. Okay, and then I will maybe very quickly cover the kind of issues when let's say I have gone and done audits of my clients who have used AI and something. What are the common issues that we at least have seen? One common issue is on governance. We see a lot of governance issues, right? People do not know. Many clients don't even know that how many AI systems are in use. AI inventory is a big problem because marketing made something, HR made something, procurement made something. So like we had a problem of shadow AI some years ago, we have a problem of shadow IT some years ago, we have a problem of shadow AI now. Okay, that's there. Then the existing policies, procedures have just not been updated from an AI perspective. They are still leveraging that, using AI but not updating. So there is no organization's point of view on what is right, what is wrong from an AI perspective. Okay, AI incident management. Assuming there is an incident because of AI, how do you deal with it? It's not there, right? So those are the kind of issues that we see. Again, cyber, lot of issues. Data leakage, very common issues. Again, the last one is very funny. I have seen that CIOs have blocked the AI software depending on what they think they know. But every day a new AI software comes. Not one, many software comes. So let's say Chat GPT may be blocked, but PO may be working. PO may be blocked, Perplexity may be working. Perplexity may be blocked, Meta AI will work. So that's again like a losing pattern, right? They say that we are cyber secure, but because of the revolution that is happening on this one, very difficult to keep up. Again, use some software which can help you with this one. There are software which can help you with this. Okay. Then regulatory, yes, this is going to really bite. Specifically, if you have clients who have exposure to the European Union, that is now a law, and there are penalties. There are big penalties. Millions of dollars. Big percentage of global revenue turnover, like it was there in GDPR. So, high time that they follow that, right? So, if you are not in compliance with regulations, you will have a problem. Okay. Again, then the regulation could not only be AI regulation; it may impact privacy regulation also. So that is also a problem. And supply chain. Again, a lot of issues in this one because I have used AI software, which I talked about from sources which I don't know, which I don't have this thing. But I use people's, let's say technology people from vendors, but they are not trained on AI security. They don't understand AI risk. They are using anything that comes to their mind. Okay, that could include a lot of risks in your enterprise. So beware of that. And then SOC 2 reports. The SOC 2 reports which are being provided by AI vendors are also half-baked at best. So let's say I talked about the example of GitHub Copilot, which is a Microsoft tool. That itself, the SOC 2 Type 2 report will only get published as maybe late as December 2024. And enterprises are already using GitHub Copilot, right? So there is a big risk there already, right? So with that kind of background, I will get onto the AI regulations bit. So it's a complicated slide by design. I wanted to overwhelm you with the fact that there are so many regulations in AI globally, right? So I hope that my point is made, right? So, but what are the common themes? Okay, these are the common themes. At a very high level on AI regulations that you're seeing, right? And many of these we have already talked about. Let me pick up some of those things which are, right? Contestability and redressal. So how do you contest, harmful AI outcomes? What are the kind of channels which are there? The regulations require some kind of setup. So a lot of countries are working on it to figure out. Different countries have taken a different kind of approach. EU has taken a very prescriptive approach. US has taken a very light touch approach. Japan in some industries has taken a heavy approach where there is safety. Let's say petroleum safety. Japan has a specific regulation of petroleum safety using AI, right? Because lives could be lost. Petroleum safety is a big deal, right? So that's why they have kind of done that. So sector-oriented kind of, that's another thing. Security, fairness, I think, human agency is a very important one. Okay, don't let any AI system be the be-all and the end-all. Let there be a human in the loop, so that somebody can decide whether I should go ahead or pull the plug. This is going in a different entity. Then the other aspect which people are generally talking about regulations is a lot of things like on I don't think it's there, on human values, democracy, so that we don't use AI for nefarious purposes. Like AI was in the news for Paris Olympics very recently, where there was a discussion saying that okay, should we use AI to monitor the crowd to identify if there are terrorists in the crowd? Okay, so visual matching. I have a terrorist database. I use cameras to say, okay, are there some people who look like terrorists, and do I need to take some? So again, they've taken some exceptional approval to do some of those things, because the EU AI Act is very clear on some of these things, saying that what can be done, what cannot be done, right? So again, a very fairly evolving field, but there will be more and more regulations that will come in, and from your perspective, you should figure out with your clients what regulation is applicable, and then ensure that you master that regulation to advise that client appropriately. Okay, so what is the way forward? And this is perhaps my last slide, and then we will maybe open it up for Q&A. Okay, so the way forward for, I've written IA because I thought that many of you would be in internal audit, but way forward for assurance, let me say, broadly speaking. And maybe we could start with that one. Okay, so start when, as assurance professionals, we should start with the being participative in the life cycle of AI. Why do I say this as a first step? Is because when you participate, you learn. So do that first. Then you also try to see whether you can leverage AI in IA, some aspects. Like you can do risk assessments. But then, of course, be the human in the loop and don't just rely on what the AI is saying. Understand from it. Okay, use AI to generate reports. Okay, then partner with the OEMs who are publishing, a lot of AI software, like the big OEMs. Partner with regulators because regulators are coming out with their point of view. Participate in industry forums because that's when a lot of ideas get exchanged. And the last bit I will say is that specifically from a responsible AI perspective, please apply some of these frameworks. When you participated, when you understood, when you also kind of hobnobbed with the regulators and everything, you will have a gamut of some understanding. But then you start applying it. Okay, you start applying it in things like risk surface area that I talked about. You provide technical training to teams. You figure out what methodologies that we should be following in the AI context. So this is just a starting point. This field is evolving, and I am no expert. And I will also learn, and I hope you will also learn as time progresses on this one. With that, we will perhaps get to the last question on the learning from this session, and then maybe we will open it up for Q&A. I think we still have maybe 7 minutes. Okay, so if you could go to this one. Okay. 0 response. No learning. Nine. Okay. There is a lot to be learned. Is the learning. Really good. That's nice. Risks that I need to improve my knowledge of AI. That's being very honest. Unstable. Menti.com. Perfect.
But that was one of the things that we wanted to cover.
At least you learned Menti.com, if not AI.
So that also has AI in the background, right?
Okay. We've got how many responses are I can't see from here.
Risks in AI, how the role of accountants will evolve, awareness about AI.
So this will keep on coming. So I think this was the last one, right?
This was the right one.
This is the last one. So maybe. Okay, so I am here for the next 5 minutes. If there are more questions, I'm happy to answer them. My session is done.
Any questions, anyone?
Oh, yes, there's a question here.
morning.
Morning.
What we have learned is that the AI is evolving very fast. Yeah. So in this day and age, while we are playing with data, there are lots of data. Yeah. And I believe that in order to audit the AI, we should also develop the tools, IT tools, for example, data analytics
Governance, yeah.
and others.
Yeah.
Yeah, to audit the AI. How far are we in terms of those tools to audit AI?
Sure. Okay, so the question is on data auditing. So see, the data auditing is a fairly mature field. If we were to say, specifically from traditional structured data approach. So for structured data, there is enough and more tools available because it's been there for ages now. So traditional data is not a problem. The problem is unstructured data. Okay, so that's why. So let me give you an example. Assuming you have an AI system which gave a response, which questions you, which brings a question to the fore that why did it respond what it did, right? And one of the things that one of the directions in which one as an auditor has to go, you figure out, okay, let me figure out on what model is trained, right? Because ultimately it's a machine learning model. So you will go to the data. What we see in enterprises, and I think that was there, this one is that typically the controls around data which are used to train AI models are very, very weak today. Because that historically nobody put control on data, training data, right? Software was tested using testing data. So controls like access controls become very, very important. Okay. Then in data, when an AI model is trained, you need to identify the features which are important for that data, right? So what are the features that were important? So you need to have some tools which can access the training. So the organization has to make the training data available to the auditor. If there is no training data, the auditor cannot audit from a data perspective, since your question was on data. The second bit, there are tools available to identify, okay, what are the features that were made important, again, through things like, techniques, as I said, like LIME. What is LIME also doing, right? Then there's another technique called SHAP, okay, which can also be done. Then there are a lot of specific techniques which are emerging, but it is again an area of research and upcoming. So to answer your question, are all the tools there today to audit data, specifically unstructured data from a generative AI perspective? Yes and no, evolving. Right? Some tools are there, many libraries are there from a Python perspective, but you can use them and with caution.
Anyone else?
We have a full of auditors and accountants here. What is your message to the audience to develop themselves to work in the future? Let's say 8 years down the line when AI is becoming reached to the AGI level. How would we work in the future?
You will definitely have an AI assistant for sure, right? In times to come, which will be blessed by the organization to say, yeah, you can rely on this. Okay, that is one thing that I see. Second is maybe you will have AI auditing AI. And you will actually, so you have a system which generates data from AI, you have an AI tool which audits that system, gives you the output, and then you as a human understand that, okay, does this make sense, does not make sense. So that's the other thing that I see. So AI because just maybe taking a detour, a big problem that the whole AI industry is now facing with is unavailability of data. The whole world's data has already been consumed by them in their training. Where do we get more data from? So what is happening is that AI is generating more data. Okay, you want data, let me generate data. Okay, so it's a very vicious cycle which is already at play, right? But of course, on some specific things, we all need to understand technology, for sure. That's my limited message. Please understand technology. Please understand some bit of programming. You don't need to be an expert, but enough to understand that, okay, what was the technique used? Was this a LIME algorithm? Was it a SHAP algorithm? what, and what does this algorithm do and not do, what are the limitations. So fit for tools you should understand, fit for purpose tools that you should understand. And of course, maybe learn also some bit of statistics, probabilities, mathematics, that will be put you in good shape. Yeah, that's what I will say. My timer saying I'm out of time, but if there is time for one question I can take, otherwise I can close it now.
Anyone with the last question for the day?
I guess there are no questions. So okay, thank you so much. Thanks for listening to me patiently.